only complaint is that there's not a direct flight from Los Angeles to Milan. So anytime I travel, it's always becomes a journey for a day to get from one place to the other. Like on Thursday, I go to Miami to get on this. I'm playing on the Blue Cruise, and it goes out of Miami. So a year ago, there was a direct flight from Milan to Miami, and now I went to book it, and nope, no more direct flight. I have to go through London. So yeah, that's the only downside of it. Otherwise, in terms of when I'm here or there, you know, it's they're I find them to be complementary, both places, one to the other. They're very different, but both work for me, so.
Complimentary in what sense?
They're very different in terms of climate uh, and in terms of, my life's in either places are very different. In LA, I have many friends, I have daughters and grandchildren there, I'm kind of like on the American time frame. And when I'm here, I have a lot more space and a lot more time during the day because everybody in America is asleep while I'm up. Because I'm basically 9 hours ahead of LA, 6 hours ahead of New York. Um, so I have a lot of time to, daydream and write songs and go for walks and read books then usually about late in the afternoon is kind of when other stuff starts happening. So I basically get a full day in of just daydreaming, which I like to do.
Are you a morning person generally?
Not really. I mean, I probably wake up at 7 and go from there. But I'm not like a super early morning person. And I'm a really slow riser, It's like so I wake up at 7 and then I'll, sit in bed and I'll look at emails and I'll read the news and I'll drink a couple of cups of coffee and you know, um, my wife, who is Italian and who runs an art gallery. She's up and out, and I just kind of get up, but I don't get out. I kind of lollygag my way into my morning and work my way through, some coffee and a shower and maybe a Pilates class and and then over to a piano or a guitar or something like that.
I've been dealing with some back problems over the past year, and a colleague recommended Pilates. I was a little hesitant at first because I had tried yoga during the pandemic and didn't love it, but man, I really like Pilates, and I can't quite nail down why, but I've really enjoyed my time doing it.
Yeah, Pilates I've probably been doing it 10 years now, and and it's a great way to stay limber, to stay kind of tone and uh so yeah, I love it as well. And you know, I remember, in the past, I kind of always, like looked askance at Pilates. I'd be like, yeah, like okay, Pilates, really. But it's a great thing to do. And you can do it as you get older, and you can get better. I still get better. I still get stronger. And so yeah, do it. It's good.
What tipped you in that direction? What finally won you over?
Well, I'm a bit of a thick head. My late wife did Pilates for a number of years, and I had the whole, I had the reformer in my house, I had the Cadillac in my house. I had all the gear in my house, and she was always on my case to do it. I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And then, life twists and turns, and you know, I lose my wife. She dies. She passes away. I have to reconfigure my life, figure out how do I navigate after being married for 32 years, and who am I and where am I, and I meet another woman, and she's big time in Pilates, and like, you need to do Pilates, and I'm like, okay, I think I'll finally try it. And then I tried it, and I'm a convert.
The universe was kind of pointing you in that direction, it sounds like.
Exactly. So universal do that.
It will, and it will repeatedly, even if you try not to pay attention to it. But
Yeah, yeah.
you use the phrase reconfigure my life, which I think is understated. It would be in any situation where one loses a spouse, but you not only lost a spouse, but you have these children. And she was really like the two of you were tied together so closely in professional terms as well. It sounds like there's a sense in which you kind of just had to completely start everything over.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't starting everything over because honestly, I had songwriting. I mean, that's always been kind of like the soul of who I am. And in that moment of being lost, uh, it was a refuge, it was an outlet, it was a creative tool, and it was the door to my evolving of my life and career. So, and it's kind of always been that for me. I mean, it could be even in smaller situations where, you feel off kilter for whatever reason for a few weeks, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? For me, it's always like when I get back to the instrument and I just start to sing and play, and I have an idea, and all of a sudden I get this kind of like sigh of relief of like, okay, now I know who I am. It just kind of centers me for everything, and so when Donna died, it became my instinctual place to go, and it kind of showed me the way out and through, and it gave me a lot of creative inspiration. It gave me a lot of real deep emotion and life experience to create out of. And it helped set the identity of who I was to be and to evolve into as an artist. So these last, 12, almost 12 years now that Donna's been gone, I've been on this journey as a solo artist, singing my own songs and touring around and building an audience and growing and taking on different challenges and refining what I do and so life is full, and somewhere along the way, you try to figure out, can I fall in love again? Should I,
Mhm.
wow, I thought I could be alone. I hate being alone. All this stuff is songs that I was able to write, all these challenges and all these emotions that I was dealing with. And then, yeah, then, wow, you fall in love again and you're like, wow. And then, you could write a whole album of falling in love songs. And so, you know, that's kind of how it's been for me in this last part of my, you know, journey.
Identity is a really interesting word in this context because there is a sense in which you were really discovering yourself, not only personally, but also musically, because so much of your output was tied to her songs and songs that she performed. So there is a sense in which you really did have to figure out who you were
Oh,
creatively and
absolutely.
musically.
Absolutely. I mean, even personally, you know, it was almost like I didn't know who I was supposed to be because, you know, we were we were married, we were together for 35 years. So it was like who I was when I started my relationship with Donna and who I was when that ended. I was a completely different person, but so I only had been the guy before and the guy that I was then. I didn't know who I was supposed to be now, because I couldn't go back to being the guy who who was single and in his 20s, that wouldn't have worked, So I was like, okay, so what is this, and creatively, so much of our life, as you said, was intertwined, and so much of what I did was related to Donna and her career and our family, and which was fine. I did my first solo album in 1980. I did four albums with the Brooklyn Dreams, and then I did a solo album in 1980. And that was also the same year I got married, that Donna and I got married. And it was at that point that I realized that there was no way I could maintain me trying to be a solo artist, Donna having the career that she was having, us having children to raise, maintaining a family, maintaining her life. I said, okay, I'm happy. I always wanted to be a songwriter. I don't need, if I can still write songs. I can write for Don. I can write for other people. That's fine. And so I put, the singer-songwriter solo guy down, not knowing whether or not I would ever pick him up again. And I kind of did in a sort of half-hearted way. At some point in like the year before Donna got sick, she kept saying to me, "Okay, now it's your time. The girls are grown. You have, now it's time for you to be you." And I'd be like, "Well, okay. I mean, I am me. What do you mean?" And I started recording and not really having a sense of direction of what the core of what I was as an artist was. It was a little unclear, but I was searching. But once I hit this first album that I started writing when Donna got sick, I really broke it down to, guitar and voice. And, and because I just wanted it to be the solid foundation of guitar and voice. I didn't want any frill to distract it, to dilute it, to I wanted to make sure that the song was solid and it had to stand on its own, and I had to be able to, as an artist, perform that song by myself. And so that was the concept of how I began it. And so in all the productions of the records that I've done since then, it's been an ongoing kind of, evolution of production in terms of minimal and how much to add and what not to add. And this current album, Talking Ugly Truth, Telling Pretty Lies, is kind of like the evolution into me being, secure enough in my identity as an artist to really dress it up in a more postmodern kind of production. Um, and so that's kind of how I wound up here.
What does postmodern mean in this context?
To me, it's a contemporary production, modern sounds, you know, but at the same time, it has a um, a foundation in uh, the past in terms of genres. It's contemporary production, but it still has a sense of tradition in what it's doing.
It strikes me too that whether consciously or unconsciously, um, stripping things down to just a voice and a guitar is really sort of going in the opposite direction. You're in Donna's work, like famously, the work that you did with Giorgio Moroder, in the disco era is very, in a lot of ways, is very maximalist. So it's almost as if this was a response to some of that early work.
Oh, absolutely. Because when I've been most of my life, as a collaborator, and um, in collaborating, you know, play a different role. When it came down to me by myself, that's why I think um, I felt like I had to build it from the ground up because when you're working with other people, you're compromising and you're acquiescing, you're serving a different purpose. When you're writing a song, it's for another artist. It's being produced by a producer of that artist. So it's a different thing. That's why, in agreeing with you, that's kind of why I broke it down to starting from, just the guitar. And that's why I'm saying now with the new record, it's evolved back into more of a production, than when I first started, you know, because I feel like I'm secure enough, in who I am as an artist now that I can have fun and do that again, to do it more.
Was there a fear initially putting yourself out there in that way and without that? One of the nice things about being in a band and having full music production is not necessarily you have a place to hide, but that you're not taking that everything doesn't necessarily fall on your shoulders.
You're absolutely right. And I was hiding, and I knew I was hiding. And so, on the psychological side of all this, when I arrived at this place, and I had to choose, well, do I go on with my life or do I curl up in a corner and just, let it go? Uh, it was the fact that psychologically, I knew that I had been hiding all these years because it was easy and it was comfortable, and but at the same time, I understood that I had this, not to use a pompous word because I don't mean it in that way, but I felt I had this calling to be this guy, and I avoided it because I was afraid to do it by myself. I was afraid to sing on my own. I didn't want to bear all that weight. Um, uh, I didn't want to bear all the weight of, and the truth of the matter is, I believe, in looking back at myself, is I probably wasn't even ready then. It took me all this time, and we spoke a little bit about, how life will do its thing with you earlier. It took me all this time to where I got to this time where I was actually ready. It was, I almost could have said to myself, Bruce, it's now or never, so you've avoided this all these years, and now it's time to actually put yourself on the line, and or not, but I chose to, and I'm very glad that I did, because as we, you know, can easily recognize, a big part of life is facing your fears.
As you said earlier, it wasn't exactly starting from scratch, but perhaps there is a sense in which it was, in that certainly you can't take for granted that there's going to be an audience there when you first sit out and do this.
Oh, there was no audience. I still don't have a really big audience. People, I'm far from a household name. Again, I was always in collaboration and in service to another purpose. So in many ways, it was starting from scratch. Um, and but there again, I mean, it's why not? Why not? The goal is, my goal is to improve what I do, keep refining what I do, keep staying engaged with life, still responding to that engagement. Thus far, I remain inspired. So and that's the core of it, and then I also have this model of keep living, keep writing, so far it's served me well.
You owe it to yourself to set realistic expectations too. Like for example, Don, Donna Summer was a superstar. She was a genre defining superstar. You have to put your expectations for success into perspective.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and that's why I'm saying my expectation of success is to keep improving, to keep refining my craft, to keep being inspired and responding emotionally and creatively. And the rest of the things will happen as they're happen will supposed to be will happen as they're supposed to happen. Those are things that you can't control. You know, a big part of many people's lives, especially artists, you know, there's a lot of serendipity in success. You know, and the thing is that you have to show up, you have to do your job, you have to whatever, but you know, you also have to be lucky, for lack of a better word. I mean, Donna was supremely talented. She had an amazing voice. She was, you know, a great entertainer, a great personality, a very empathetic person, but she had a great team. Giorgio is great. Neil Bogart was a visionary. There were so many elements that come into play with that kind of success and there's a synergy that happens when, you can try and create the chemistry and you always do. But when it actually happens, it's something that is actually beyond you, and it's something that you're swept up in, and you're just flying along in that moment. So yeah, don't know where I was going, but that's where I landed.
I think you're spot on. And this is something I talk to artists about a lot, and I appreciate when they can recognize it in themselves that we almost need to destigmatize luck. As we use luck as almost a bad word, as though saying the word luck takes away from the talents that you have. If those talents aren't there, you're not going to have that success in the first place. So I like that people can reappropriate that and can appreciate that you could also be the most talented person in the world and that things could just never quite hit right.
Yeah, and that happens more often than not. I know many, many talented people who for whatever reason don't get anywhere.
It's interesting because so much of this work that you're doing now, as you said, is really an effort to discover yourself and to almost have the second or third or whatever number career that you're on at this point. But then going back and reconnecting with a song like Bad Girls, which, was one of her signature songs. What was that experience like?
How I do the song and how I started doing the song in my shows is I say that, Bad Girls was a very big record. It had great horn parts and it had great hooks and it had a great rhythm track. And it was a number one pop song and a number one R&B song and a number one dance song all around the world. But this song was written on an acoustic guitar just like this. And this is how we wrote it, and so that's the essence of how I approached my version of Bad Girls. I just did it basically the way we wrote it. And and when I do it that way, uh, it sheds a whole different light on the song. Uh, it still has a rhythm, but the story of the song and the import of the song and the message of the song seems to resonate stronger uh, than Donna's record, because Donna's record was all about toot toot beep beep, and that was great. It's an amazing record, and I'm not at all taking anything away from that record. That is a great record. But, I'm just saying, when I do it and I break it down to where, what it was inspired from, and it's just the words and the guitar, more or less. It has its own life, and it also has its own resonance, because as a song, it holds up. And that's the thing. When Donna and I used to write songs, we would do two things. We would keep the music basic. In other words, it would be either I'd be on guitar or a piano, and we would do the song slow. And so this way we could analyze every aspect of the song, every aspect of the lyric, every aspect of the melody. Is it holding up? Is it holding up? And then, you add a little rhythm to it, but you always want to come with the foundation of a strong song. That's really the most important thing.
I've heard the sentiment echoed from a lot of musicians, and sometimes there's a reason why cliches are cliches. Is that a great song is one that can be played on any instrument.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. And that also speaks to why I wanted to break it down in the beginning of just the guitar and the voice. So the song had to be able to hold up, on its own.
I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up in a time when I think disco was still a bad word for a lot of people. I grew up listening to a lot of punk rock, and I think that's something that, well, people have since come around to, but that critics didn't appreciate at the time, was that the skeleton was always there. A great song is a great song regardless of how much production is layered on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. The disco bad rap, it doesn't exist without some truth to it, because of the bigness. It's not the word I'm really looking for, but the extravagance, let's say, of the production, of the strings and the horns and the four on the floor and and the bells and the whistles and all this stuff. There were many times where you had a song that wasn't so great, and I think that that's something that Donna and I, and Giorgio and Pete and everybody in that camp, we all had made a commitment to wanting to write really great songs and record great songs, whether it be MacArthur Park or whatever. I mean, it's just to stick with the foundation of start with a great song and let's go from there. So I think that commitment was there, but for Donna, but I think there were other disco songs that didn't have that you know methodology, let's say. But I guess you could say of any genre. I'm sure there were punk songs that were trite, and then there was others that were screaming the truth.
It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine the other week, somebody who I talk to about music a lot. And speaking of things that for whatever reason have fallen out of favor and just don't get the love that they deserve, I don't understand. Well, I mean, I have a theory, and we could talk about this, but largely, I don't understand why Tommy James isn't regarded as just one of the great performers of the era. I mean, when you look down at the just great all-time songs that he performed, I just don't understand why he's not on that short list for people.
You know, Look, I'm right there with you. I'm a big proponent of Tommy James should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Um, I don't know what the answer to this question is. But first of all, one thing about Tommy that I recognize now because I spend a lot of time in Europe is that he's not famous in Europe.
Oh, that's interesting because he was really, in a lot of ways, he was one of those almost responses to the British invasion over here.
Yes, yeah, but he even in the UK, because I tour in the UK, and sometimes I'll play tighter and tighter in my set. I'll be telling my story and I'll say, "Oh yeah, I was in a band. I had a hit record with this song," and they don't know. I mean, they
Mm.
know Moni Moni.
Yeah.
They know Moni Moni. If I say Tommy James, they may or may not know. If I say Moni Moni, they go like, "Oh," and maybe that's because of Billy Idol. But I mean, I'm verbalizing this now. I've never really verbalized it before because I never really thought about that. But that may be a reason why. But, when you think about, I think we're alone now, even Hanky Panky, not, that's an early, sexy, you know, rock and roll 60s garage band song. I mean, it's,
I would say I think people know I Think We're Alone Now, but for a similar reason why they might know Moni Moni, which is because of the Tiffany song.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and, but, you got Crimson and Clover, and they probably know it because of Joan Jett, you know.
Crystal Blue
Um,
Persuasion was on
Crystal
Breaking Bad
Persuasion.
famously.
Yeah, I mean, great, and they're great records. They're great records, I mean, Tommy was, I always say he was my mentor. He was the first person to take me into a recording studio. The first records I saw being made was Crimson and Clover and that album. Um, uh, so I am forever indebted to him. He should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so maybe that's part of the reason why those other things that I was saying. And also, Tommy is a very humble guy. Uh, he doesn't toot his own horn very well. He's nice as he can be. He's very gracious. He has a very cheerful personality, but his own sense of ego and pride is um, not it's really in a very humble place. And I have nothing but great things to say about him and great respect for him as an artist. And I hope that, something changes in that awareness thing, because things can change quickly. Like one little thing could happen. And, look at Tracy Chapman, so.
because this is a rare opportunity, I can bounce this off of you, but I'm curious to get your take
Yeah.
on it. And I was thinking about this last week. My theory. So I talked to I mentioned obviously like the response to the British invasion, but on top of that, I think it's because I think in a way him happening at the time that he did, and then the um the world of music shifting so dramatically into, like, largely because of the Beatles, but shifting dramatically into the albums versus singles.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that had a big impact on his legacy.
Yeah, it probably did. He was definitely caught in that window, um, of where, it was, the bubble gum was the phrase that was used back then. It's bubblegum music. And then it became, album rock. And, he probably got caught in that window, as you're saying. And the perception of him at that moment was probably not as highly regarded um, as, as his music has stood the test of time, you know, so, but I think you're exactly right. And that was a very distinct shift right there at 19, the late 60s into 1970, and 69, and he tried, and I, in many ways, succeeded in hindsight. I mean, there's the long version of Crimson and Clover. There's that whole album, where, that Crystal Blue Persuasion is also on, where, I mean, he's producing in very, cool, experimental, ways. And that was Tommy producing as well, you know. So,
Production work is always it's always fascinating to me, especially for people who are also musicians and who create their own music. It seems to me, I'm very much not a musician. I just talk to a lot of them, but it seems to me that um, the best producers are ones who give themselves up to the band that they're working with, that understand what makes the band work, and then sort of almost like morph into that function.
yeah. Well, I mean, yes, there are different kinds of.
I guess I'm saying that as we were just discussing Giorgio Moroder, and he's obviously one of the best, but he very much had his own thing as well. So I take
Right.
that back
Yeah.
as such a concrete
Yeah,
statement.
exactly. Because my mind went to Mutt Lange,
Yeah.
for the same reason that you're pointing out to Giorgio. But yeah, but there are different kinds of producers, and there was Phil Ramone, who I thought was a
Hmm.
great producer, and he was somebody who kind of like shaped himself to the artist, a little bit more than most, and but yeah, production is an interesting thing. For me, as an artist, I don't know. I think this is maybe the sixth album that I've done in the last 10 years or something like that, and I've used a few different producers, and uh, although I don't collaborate with songwriting, or I haven't in these years, I do collaborate in terms of production, and I enjoy seeing what somebody else can bring to my song and my music, and what I do. So, and on this most recent record, Ken Lewis, uh, it's my first record with Ken, and he brought a whole other, energy to it, and which I'm really happy with. So,
You bring up something, and it hadn't it hadn't occurred to me, but it makes a lot of sense that, we were talking about these songs that you're writing before, and that maybe there was a sense in which they can't necessarily be a pure expression of yourself because you're writing them for somebody else. But also, yeah, I hadn't taken into account that, I don't know, I may be wrong in this, but is it right to say that pretty much all of your music up until you really started doing solo stuff they were all co-writes?
Well, not everything, but the majority of the success that I had was as a co-writer. Let's put it that way. And one of my favorite songs that I ever wrote wasn't a big hit song, but it was a song that Donna cut, and it was called "I'm a Rainbow." And were a couple of songs. That song, and I think "Starting Over Again," which was a co-write with Donna, that was a hit, a country hit for Dolly Parton. I look at those two songs as, essentially Bruce songs, that in that, they kind of highlight my strength as a songwriter, and well, my strengths as a songwriter. But other than that, yeah, everything was co-write. And the things that I did, for the Jacksons, and those were co-writes with Michael Amardian, and Michael, is a great producer, and a great musician, and so with him, it was frequently he would give me a track, and I would just have to write to the track, and I would get with Jermaine and try to understand what Jermaine was going on in his head or his emotion, get some understanding of who he was as a person, and where, and get some fuel to write some words that he could sing, and feel like he related to them. So, but a song like "Starting Over Again" that Dolly did, that was a personal song. That was a song about the divorce of my parents, and it was only because Donna decided to sing it on the Johnny Carson show one night that Dolly even heard the song and decided to record it. Otherwise it, may never have seen the light of day.
Was that written to be a country song?
No, it was, it was just a Bruce song. It was a song I wrote on the piano, but I'm also, I'm not 100% on this philosophy, but I think many songs can be dressed up in different genres, and that's where production can really come
Yeah.
into play. That's where production does our production can influence the direction of a song uh, very easily, So, I mean, even Dolly's version of the song, if you listen to it, it doesn't really sound that country. It almost sounds, like an adult contemporary production of that time, and when I do it and I just do it on an acoustic guitar, it sounds like, it just sounds like a singer-songwriter singing a song.
I ask partially, this has probably been really interesting for you to watch unfold, but I mean, obviously, again, Beyonce is one of those genre-defining superstars, but that there was any surprise or any backlash to her recording a country album is strikes me as very strange for a number of reasons. But one of which is, I think that some of the work that you and Donna were doing definitely crossed over decades ago.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's another song on the Bad Girls album called "On My Honor," which very easily could be, a country song, and yeah, and it was also interesting. I did a couple of weeks ago. I played at the Folk Alliance International convention, and I did starting over that night, and I introed it because this was basically the week that Beyonce's song went number one on the country chart, and everybody was still talking about Tracy Chapman, and and I said, uh, Tracy Chapman may have been the first, black female to have a write a number one country song by herself. But, Donna Summer and I co-wrote a number one country song for Dolly Parton, 30 years ago. So, in some ways, Donna broke that barrier as well.
It's one of those things. It's like, you describing Tommy James as being gracious and humble, where I wonder if there's just a certain extent to which it's like, yeah, I mean, she broke those barriers, but you can't let that take away from the work that people are doing now, and the fact that, like, yeah, those barriers still very much need to be broken.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I continued my thought in introducing the song was I said change, you know, I said, and my point in saying this is that change happens slowly until it actually happens and it breaks and then it's sudden. It's like, you don't notice that things are changing because it's like a simmering that's going on, and it's like all these atoms are moving around, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's the explosion. But there have been seeds of that, for a long, long time. So
We can officially say that it's happened when these things no longer feel notable.
exactly. Exactly.
Bad girls talking about the sad girls. Sad girls talking about the bad girls. Toot toot.